fought its first iteration of Compound V. If Homelander got his hands on some, he'd be immortal.
Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I remember getting introduced to the boys comics in a reverse way. I mean, it was kind of an underdog in the world of comics, and for me, the show was a starting point. Now, once season 1 was over and I didn't know what to do with life, the comics became my savior. Needless to say, I was blown away and couldn't help but wonder how strong Erik Kripke's gut was for adapting a story like this. That being said, I figured that the showrunner left out some extremely dark aspects from Garth, Ennis and Darick Robertson's pages, and I get why. The boys comics have some of the most twisted and unhinged depictions that had to stay buried in print only. But not anymore. Because today, I'll be picking out the 8 most twisted relationships shown in the original comics. Homelander and Black Noir. Unlike in the show, Black Noir was not someone who danced on Homelander's fingertips in the comics. In issue 65, a horrific truth was revealed that showed how Black Noir and Homelander's relationship was a reflection of a horrible master-servant dynamic. Noir was basically a clone of Homelander who was engineered by Vought as a failsafe to rein in Homelander and kill him if he ever went out of bounds. Now, Homelander did a whole lot of questionable things, yet it was not enough for Vought to use Black Noir against him. Tired of waiting around and living under the shadow of Homelander, Black Noir took matters into his own hands. And as a copy of Homelander, he chalked out an elaborate plan to destroy the original from inside. The comic clarifies that it was Noir all along, from forcing himself on Butcher's wife to doing grotesque acts like eating babies and violating dead bodies. He was driven insane by the psychological torture of simply existing as a copy, and carried out such atrocities to ultimately pin them on Homelander. However, if you think about it, Noir could never create an identity for himself, and actually always lived with a borrowed one, which makes his relationship with the big blue baddie, and with his own self, one of the most crooked ones in the comics. Noir wanted to get rid of Homelander and be his face for so long that he ended up turning that very face into a psychopath. Homelander stood there and looked at Black Noir, and it felt like he was literally looking into a mirror and questioning his entire life and identity. And then, in one of the most warped fights, he lasers a Soup who happens to be a version of him. I can't even fathom the mental torment one has to go through to fatally wound someone who stole his appearance and selfhood, as well as making Homelander believe that it was him all along.
You hang in there, alright? You be a good boy for Judy.
Butcher and Terror. The series gave us a few glimpses to show that Butcher, out of everyone, has an affectionate side, which can go as far as calling his English bulldog a good boy. However, in the comics, Butcher and his dog, Terror, have a complicated bond. Terror is introduced in the very first issue, and we see him in a park with Butcher. Now, any sane person would train their dogs to obey commands and be well behaved in public. But not Butcher. He taught Terror to sexually violate things on command. In issue 2, Butcher tells Terror to fuck it to prove a point to Huey, and the fierce bulldog forces himself on a Shih Tzu named Benjamin. Terror is indeed a loyal dog, but Butcher's dynamic with him is fraught with chaos, and he is used routinely as a weapon by Butcher to humiliate enemies and even bystanders. Terror even does a good job of peeing on Homelander's leg, and though Butcher and Terror's relationship might seem like the dog ended up getting a cruel master, what really makes it complicated is Butcher's obsessive love for him. He literally warned Homelander, "You harm one hair on his head and it starts now." And when Homelander couldn't quite grasp why one would be so stupid as to pick up a fight with him over a dog, Butcher tells him, "Over my dog." You see, the thing is, Terror has been the only constant in Billy's life after Becky passed away, and the dog was someone who never judged him. In Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker, we learn that he got Terror soon afterwards as a present after he lost everything in life and took him to meet his mother. Initially, he thought that having a dog would be troublesome, but soon Butcher started enjoying teaching him tricks. Tricks like the ones I mentioned earlier. He has always been extremely protective of Terror, and even tells him to stay away from danger. Butcher and Huey even shared a sweet moment with Terror, where the latter accepted that he doesn't tell Terror he's a good boy enough. But Billy knows that he is, and even took him on a mission. Sadly, Terror was killed when Butcher released information on Jack from Jupiter. It was actually Black Noir who killed the dog at the Flatiron building. And naturally, Butcher went out of his mind, and this is where it really gets tricky. I understand that Terror got an untimely and uncalled for death, but the way Butcher reacted to it shows just how unhealthily fixated he was on the dog. When he found Terror dead, he just said, "I gotta see a man about a dog," and left. He mistook Jack for the killer, and oh boy, the way Butcher got a Jack, holy crap. All he kept saying, like a broken record, was, "Why'd you kill me dog, Jack?" And right there, you know how effed up the entire thing is. Tek Knight and Laddios. We know that Tek Knight suffers from one of the weirdest disorders in The Boys and literally gets aroused by anything at any time. The man even ended up doing his therapist's cat while trying to seek help for his sexual psychosis. In fact, he is known for having spontaneous sexual relationships with both living and non-living objects, like a tiger carpet and his Tekmobile. Tek is mostly mentioned in the initial seasons of the series, but we finally see what a psychotic bastard he is in the season 4 episode titled Dirty Business, where he shows Huey his BDSM dungeon, and later in the spin-off series Gen V. However, in the comics, Tek's perversions is taken even further. He is shown talking dirty and raunchy while engaging in intercourse with random objects. A newspaper in the comics even reports that Tek tried to assault his family butler. But the worst part is his relationship with his sidekick system, the Laddios, which is clearly modeled after Batman and Robin, but twisted into something far more disturbing. Tek Knight often sends his Laddios away, supposedly to keep them safe, but the implication of his obsession makes the dynamic extremely uncomfortable and far from heroic. Marvin and his mother. Now, Marvin T. Milk, or MM, is probably the one guy in The Boys who looks like he has things under control. He's the rational one of the group and is the guy known for holding Butcher's chaos together. But the comics quietly revealed that his stability is built on one of the most disturbing relationships in the entire series. And it all starts with his mother. Marvin is better known as MM, or Mother's Milk, and it is not just some strange label. You see, Marvin was born with Compound V already in his system because his mother worked at Vought facility and was constantly exposed to it. So when she gave birth to Marvin, he was actually born as a soup. Of course, he got the basic perks of being a soup: strength, durability, intelligence, slow aging, and all that. But the gift came with a cost. Marvin's body is totally dependent on his mother to function. And no, I am not talking about emotional dependence. It's physical in the most literal sense. MM needs her breast milk loaded with Compound V to maintain his powers. Yes, that means that even as an adult, he has to keep drinking his mom's breast milk. Consequently, their relationship stops being about care and becomes about survival. And over time, that dependency wrecks any normal idea of family. MM's mother is shown as this writhing mass of flesh who stays in the shadow of their family home, and whom MM visits mostly out of compulsion. The darkness in which she stays is a greater metaphor for the convoluted relationship she has with her son, and what she has to do for him. MM himself is disgusted by it at times. The comics makes it clear he does not fully accept or enjoy what he has to do. For example, in issue 17, he is shown throwing out just after drinking the milk. Sometimes he would carry stored milk while on missions, but the fact stays the same. A grown-ass man drinks his mother's breast milk like it's some energy drink. Yet there is no alternative because he's trapped in a system where rejecting his mother means rejecting his own resilience. And that is just horrifying. Godolkin and the G-Men. No brownie points for guessing that the G-Men are a parody of the X-Men, and were introduced in the Boys comics in issue 23 after one of their members, Silver Kincaid, died publicly. Thanks to the legend, Huey learns that the G-Men are not exactly the A-list soups like the Seven or Payback. However, they had several spin-off teams like G-Wiz and G-Force, which Vought treated as IPs to print money, especially from comics. The G-Men members were known for being rebels and runaways, and Godolkin took those outcasts and orphans in. Butcher then came up with a brilliant plan to plant Huey as a bug in the G-Men's house on Long Island to understand what really goes on there. At first, we see young soups partying like crazy teenagers, but soon one of them spills that Godolkin took them in at a very young age and kept them in a different place until they grew up enough to join the rest of the team. Godolkin called all of them his children and oversaw their soup training. In fact, all the impressionable young soups also looked up to Godolkin, but in reality he was a pedophile who founded the team sometime in 1984. He then got his hands on Compound V and made a deal with Vault. The storyline We Gotta Go Now shows how a sick middle-aged man takes in a group of teenagers and dresses them up to his liking. The boys put together the truth that Godolkin abducted children, brainwashed them, and molested them with the promise of superpowers and a hedonistic lifestyle. In short, he stole their old identities and passed them off as vulnerable children whom he took care of. Thus, the family he built was basically a collection of trauma survivors. And frankly, it is more like a cult. Most of the members were loyal to him, but anyone who threatened the G-Man's existence or even dared to question Godolkin's authority was quietly killed. Take Nubia, for example. When she tried to leave, Godolkin had Silver Kincaid murder her. Kincaid later took her own life out of guilt. And Nubia, she was resurrected and brought back into a nearly brain-dead state. What makes this one the most chilling relationship in comics is that most of the G-Men still don't fully understand what was done to them. The conditioning runs so deep that the abuse doesn't even register as abuse, and they defend it. Starlight and Homelander. This is by far the most heartbreaking power dynamic I have seen in the boys' comics. Annie January, aka Starlight, has been the poster girl of goodness and virtue. When she joined the Seven, Annie's eyes and heart were filled with hope. Hope to help people in need and do something good for the world. Obviously, as a young soup, she looked up to Homelander, the OG boss of the Seven. However, instead of forming a mentor-trainee relationship, Annie ended up being sexually abused by her role model. In issue 3, we see Homelander welcoming her, and just when you feel happy for Annie, there he was. Homelander and his minions, A-Train and Black Noir, just stood there with their pants down, and it struck Annie. The real price she had to pay for being part of America's greatest superhero team was her dignity, shattered. She asked Homelander, "You're going to force yourself on me?" And Homelander calmly told her no one's forcing her. It's just a test of her dedication. Yes, Starlight's relationship with Homelander started out with molestation, betrayal, and an insane abuse of authority. The worst part is she had to go through with it and sit with them at the table the next day, where Homelander introduced her to the rest of the team. When a shaken Annie fumbled for words, Homelander told her that it was okay and that she was among friends. Yeah, right, dude. The fact that Starlight had to spend days living and working with her perpetrators is as warped as Ennis' mind could go. Monique and Janine. Poor MM had nothing close to normal family in the comics. He was married to Monique and had a young daughter named Janine. However, they have been divorced for a long time, and Monique is a crack addict. And Janine was a typical rebellious teenager who would get into fights with her father over dressing appropriately. It becomes clear that she stays with MM and wants to go stay with her mom for a while. It is through Billy that we get to know about Janine, as he describes her as a drunk slag who couldn't be trusted to wipe her own arm. MM took her in when she was just 6 months old and has been looking after her ever since. Yet, Janine went to her mother, and the woman gave her little bumps and roped a 12-year-old kid into shooting incest porn together. Yes, you heard that right. MM's wife got their daughter to shoot a nasty video, which went viral, by the way. Homelander and Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy in the comics is nothing like what he is in the show. For starters, he is not the strongest soups Vought ever created, and neither is he Homelander's dad. Rather, Soldier Boy is a cowardly, overly patriotic superhero and supposedly the elected leader of Payback. Though in reality, he's more of a figurehead than an actual authority. He tries to carry himself like a classic American icon and constantly pushes the image of being worthy of the Seven. But beneath all the performative patriotism, he is insecure, easily manipulated, and far from the powerful leader he pretends to be. But that's not all. Soldier Boy was around long before Homelander, and in issue 1 of Herogasm, Homelander actually manipulates Soldier Boy into sleeping with him, telling him it was an audition to join the Seven. Wait, it gets worse. When Soldier Boy wants confirmation from him that there wasn't anything gay there, he just gaslights him, saying, "I am Homelander. You are Soldier Boy." Where on earth did he get an idea like that? The fact that these characters play a father-son duo in the show makes it even more horrifying. Alright guys, that's all for today. Nothing can come close to The Boys when it comes to showing edgy and utterly deranged relationships. I'll never understand how Ennis came up with such grisly ideas, but truth be told, I'm an absolute sucker for these kinds of messed up stories. Now that we are on the final season of The Boys, there's one thing I can say for sure. The 72-issue comic run will always be a treasure fans can keep digging back into. Do let us know how irked you are in the comments below, and if you liked this video, don't forget to like and share it with fellow boys lovers. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.